If you've been following this series so far, then hopefully by now you have bought your blaster to modify. Now we need to talk about how you go about modifying that blaster on a budget. And as you can see for that, Foamy's broken out his whiteboard. So the first thing that I would like to mention about the buying of a blaster is something which seems to come up a lot on forums. And I get it in person as well, which is the question, why would you spend £100 modifying a 10-20 quid toy? Well, to be honest, that's a bit like saying, why would you spend £100 turning a 7 quid spring into an amazing retaliator? Or why would you spend £16,000 turning a cheap spark plug into a car? It doesn't make sense. The blaster is just a part of the build. And if you think about it any differently, then essentially you're going to shy away from modifications just because you're worried about spending any sum of money on what is essentially a toy. When it comes to modification, I tend to break modification down into what I refer to as the 3 Ps.
Performance,
practicality, cross my T, and appearance, as in appearance. It was the only way I could make it work. Sorry. Which of these you prioritise is going to depend very much on what you intend to get out of the mod. And ultimately, chances are you will probably mix and match all 3. For example, if you're a cosplayer, then you're probably going to be more interested in how your blaster looks than how it's going to sort of perform during a Nerf war. If your primary concern is going out and playing in Nerf wars, then perhaps one or both of these is going to become your priority. I will go over kind of a basic, very generalised process of modification for both a Springer and a flywheeler in a couple of separate videos, and then maybe talk a bit about modifying the appearance of your blaster and the aesthetics as well. To give you a bit of a general overview on this, the first thing that I'm going to do is get a Venn diagram. Excuse my terrible handwriting. Should have been a doctor. So, you will have performance, and you will have practicality, and you have this overlap in the middle here. Now, that overlap could be mutually beneficial things. So, for example, if you installed a pump grip on a retaliator, that is going to increase the practicality of the blaster because it's going to make it more comfortable to use, it's going to make it easier to prime than using that top prime. However, at the same time, it is going to increase the performance because naturally it's going to improve your rate of fire. Now imagine that you have decided that it's very important to you that your blaster shoots really hard. So you install a big beefy spring and that is going to make your darts fly further. However, the other side of that is that it's going to increase your draw weight. And that is probably going to slow down your rate of fire because it's going to take more effort to prime, and that is going to negatively impact your practicality. So this overlap could in fact go either way. In terms of appearance, that kind of sits separately to the correlation between performance and practicality. However, when you're taking into account things like choosing the appearance of, for example, your pump grip when you're improving your blaster, then these two can both lead into this one. Now, it's important to bear in mind that we are talking about working on a budget. That means that you are going to need to work out what your end goal is with your modification, what parts you need and what those parts are going to cost you. You then need to work out how much you can afford to spend every week or every month or however often it is that you're going to take your budget out for your modifications. And the result of that may be that occasionally you have to wait for 2 lots of that budget to come through before you can actually buy a part. Do not, however, fall into the trap of buying cheaper parts to get it done quicker. The point of this guide is to get that high level modification by being patient and saving your money and getting those parts when you can afford them. Interestingly, the Swedish version of a Venn diagram is where you draw all of the parts separately and then join them together afterwards, and that is called a Venn diagram. Another important thing to consider is being able to still use the blaster in between stages of modification. To illustrate my point, I'm going to use my main primary, which is my Raven Hugin. So to explain the process that I went through when modifying Hugin, I started off with a rewire and a 3S LiPo, and that was it. This was then my Nerf War blaster for a good couple of months whilst I got some other parts up together. So I bought myself a flywheel cage, motors, flywheels, and a 180 cover. And only once I had purchased all of those parts was I then able to carry out the next stage of the modification. So it was really important to me that this was usable until I was able to install this. The way that worked was that I installed the 180 cover here to give me room to then pop the flywheel cage with my chosen flywheels and my chosen motors inside as a second stage. Next thing I did was to get back onto my 3D print guy Alistair at Blaster Arts and have him print me up a 3S LiPo cover. Up to this point I had simply been taping my LiPo to my blaster and it worked absolutely fine. I was then able to install the battery cover. The battery cover is in fact part of this here, the appearance. I didn't need it. I was perfectly able to use tape or Velcro straps to attach the battery to the blaster. However, it didn't look very clean, and that is why I then came into ordering that. I then ordered myself the voltmeter and I installed that. Once I had done all of those things, because this was more important to me because I needed this blaster to take to Nerf Wars and play with. And bearing in mind again, at every single stage the blaster remained usable in between the installation of the next phase of the modification. I then bought my paint. Now if you've been modding blasters for a little while, chances are you already have paint floating around, but if you don't, this was the stage that I bought the paint. Now to point out a little mistake that I made, during the course of installing my parts, several of the parts on this blaster were installed rather permanently, which meant I couldn't remove them. So painting the blaster involved an awful lot of masking tape and cling film to make sure that I didn't paint those parts. Don't make the same mistake I did. When you're planning your modification, make sure that you can remove parts in order to get it painted if that's the order you're doing things in. Or better still, strip the shell out and paint it first. And completely without planning to do so, look, this has made a little happy face, which is how you will feel when you have finished modifying your blaster. The final thing that I did was to get hold of the long strike barrel. Now, one of the reasons this was the final thing I did was because if you watched the last video, as you'll know, I'm a big advocate of waiting around for things to come up for the right price, and I waited very patiently for a long strike barrel to come up that was within my budget. So there you have it. That really serves as an introduction to the next couple of videos that I'm going to do, which will be a fairly wide-reaching, all-encompassing discussion on modification points for both springers and flywheel blasters. If you've enjoyed the series so far, then please give me a like and subscribe. If there's anything that you would like to see me cover that I haven't covered yet, please pop it in the comments and I will do my best to cover it in future videos. Thank you.